Chapter 581, both getting into character and detachment.
Only a single Black Death. The other ships are anchored beyond the Rorstead Archipelago's confines because they're afraid of being discovered? This is good news.
Klein retracted his gaze and deliberately bit his lip to express his agitation. After taking a glance at Helene's side profile, Mythor lit a torch and began swinging it to signal to the flagship. Before long, a dinghy came and took him and the disguised Klein back to the Black Death. As the dinghy was being hoisted up, Klein boarded another pirate admiral's flagship. Under Mythor's lead, he entered the cabin. Waiting for them up ahead was a blonde female attendant. She glanced at Helene with a cold stare before pointing sideways to the room.
Go in.
This attitude, it's like meeting a love rival in the flesh. Both men and women fall to this Vice Admiral Ailment's charm.
The cuffed Klein instantly increased his vigilance as he wore a heavy expression and followed the blonde female attendant into the room. He originally believed that he would immediately meet Tracy and obtain a chance to meet her in private. He was already ready to strike, but apart from a wardrobe, sofa, and full-body mirror in a cramped, carpeted room, there was nothing.
Could it be that Tracy has deliberately given Helene the cold shoulder to express her anger?
Klein recalled the romance novels and contrived television serials he had previously watched while contemplating the reason for the ailment maiden's actions. The blonde female attendant shot a glance at Helene's male attire that lacked the androgynous beauty to it due to the lack of makeup, took 2 quick steps, opened the wardrobe, and pointed to the dresses inside.
Captain doesn't like your present attire. Change.
Fuck.
Klein cursed inwardly. He originally imagined that he could be granted a meeting with Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy while looking like Helene and dressed as a male. He was thankful that he didn't need to overly humiliate himself to achieve his goal, but in the end, he didn't manage to escape this outcome that he wanted to avoid. Seeing Helene standing there in a daze, the blonde female attendant glared at her.
You have 2 choices. Either you change yourself, or I'll help you.
Klein did one of red-haired Helene's habitual motions and inhaled slightly.
Remove my cuffs.
He turned his body sideways and gestured with his chin towards the door.
And go outside.
The blonde female attendant cursed under her breath and used the key given to her by Mythor to release Helene from her cuffs. After she left the room and closed the door, Klein walked to the wardrobe and stood there in a daze for 20 seconds. Suddenly, he closed his eyes and extended his right hand. After an unknown period of time, he came in front of the full-body mirror and saw Helene's red hair cascading down in the reflection. Her green eyes shimmered while she wore a golden-red dress. By her waist was a ribbon tied into a flower. It was pulled tight, accentuating her slender waist. Helene's beautiful face was flushed red as her lips were tightly pursed. Her expression was heavy, looking very identical to the picture from before. Klein looked at his present image and first felt somewhat embarrassed. However, he had gotten over it to a certain extent while changing. Besides, there wasn't anyone inside. Second, he gradually found a different feeling. This wasn't to say that he was gradually liking such acts. Instead, while overcoming his mental aversion, he gained some form of detachment from his self-awareness. It felt like his soul had flown out of his body, allowing him to calmly observe Helena dressing up in female attire and adjusting her clothes through the mirror with a calm attitude. He believed this was a necessary step in his mission, and that there was nothing embarrassing or odd about this. Klein felt a baffling sense of familiarity as he tried hard to recall and compare this feeling in a bid to fix it in place and gain an understanding of it. Soon, he found the source. This was similar to him playing role-playing games. In it, he could choose a female character, carefully choosing the facial features and attire of the character, allowing the beauty to please his eyes. There was nothing kinky or embarrassing while doing this. On the one hand, he was viewing it from an angle of a god through the screen, making his attitude detached, and on the other hand, he was seriously acting and going through the plot. By combining the two perfectly and not distinguishing between them, He didn't have any aversion to it because he was playing a game.
This.
Klein suddenly opened his half-closed eyes, feeling like this was the faceless state he had been searching for.
He could act as anyone, but he was still only himself. As he got into character and worked hard to act, he could detach his feelings and observe things calmly. By making comparisons, he could figure himself out and find his true self. It's both getting into character and detachment. This is the actual application of the faceless's main principle.
Klein suddenly felt at peace as the remnant embarrassment coexisted with his changed attitude. With a detached attitude, as though he was playing a role-playing game, he observed himself in the full-body mirror and tried hard to find any flaws.
Thankfully, I got Danitz to get 2 sets of female clothing to study the way it's all put together. Otherwise, there's no way I could wear them so quickly and normally as a first-timer. It will be easy to expose any flaws. This is called professionalism. Women's clothing sure is complicated. From the perspective of a faceless, there are many flaws in Helene's facial features and contours. She might be beautiful, but it's definitely nothing I call stunning. Yes, with this state of mind, I can clearly feel the potion digesting.
Klein looked at himself in the mirror as though he was looking at a character named Helene. Thump, thump, thump! The blonde female attendant banged on the door and asked impatiently,
Are you not done?
Klein's face instantly sank, as though she hadn't returned him the 10,000 pounds she owed him. He maintained this state as he walked to the door and pulled it open. The blonde female attendant shot him a glance and raised the handcuffs.
Put your hands to your back. You're now a prisoner.
As red-haired Helene was on the Black Death, she wasn't afraid that she would bring her any harm. All she wanted was to humiliate her as much as she could. Klein grunted and half-turned his body, putting his hands to his back. He felt relaxed because the woman wasn't paying too much attention to his attire. After putting on the cuffs, he was led by the blonde female attendant to the entrance of the captain's cabin. The door was half open, allowing a fragrance of warmth emanate outside. It wasn't too strong, but it was sufficiently long-lasting. It was a scent that kept pulling one back as they would involuntarily wish to head to bed for pleasure. The blonde female attendant knocked on the door and was just about to say a word when a gloomy but sufficiently beautiful female voice sounded from the inside.
Let her come in alone.
The blonde attendant's face instantly sank as she pushed open the door, signaling with her eyes for Klein to enter.
The moment of truth is here.
Klein took a deep breath and stepped into the room. The door behind him closed with a thud, isolating the inside from the outside. Klein walked across the thick carpet and, using the candlelight from the golden candle racks, saw a rather beautiful lady sitting behind a desk while leaning back. She was wearing beige trousers with her feet extended diagonally while crossed. Her brows were long and straight, and her azure blue eyes were sharp and bright. She wore a white linen shirt, allowing her intimate body to faintly peek through. Raven black curled hair cascaded down to hide the critical bits, making Klein instantly feel uncomfortable. Upon seeing red-haired Helene enter, Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy raised her left hand and asked with an ambiguous smile.
Tell me, how should I punish you?
She held a black leather whip in her hand.
Ma'am, there's always room for discussion.
Klein lampooned to resist his discomfort. His eyes first moved upwards before leveling towards her. He said without a hint of emotion,
Returning to this place is already the greatest punishment. Anything else is just a bonus.
Tracy stood up. She was tall and slender, and under the illumination of the candlelight, her figure's shadows danced with extreme charm.
You're as stubborn as usual, yet always so indecisive.
She held back her smile and walked towards red-haired Helene, with the leather whip in her left hand. She didn't have an ounce of doubt. During this process, Klein noticed that she wore a bangle with inlaid diamonds on her right wrist.
The mystical item described by Helene? It can reduce most forms of damage?
Klein, who had originally planned to take action the moment the gap between them narrowed, held back his urge. Tracy said with a smile, but her azure blue eyes seemed to be a stormy ocean that was gathering strength.
Oh, they cuffed you. That's nice. We haven't played such a game before.
Ma'am, your lines are quite terrible.
Klein pursed his lips tightly and didn't say a word. Tracy came in front of him and raised her right hand to slide down his cheek.
Returning is the greatest punishment?
As she spoke, her eyes turned misty, looking extremely alluring.
You usually don't seem to think so. Although you always resist in the beginning, you're often more passionate than me towards the end.
Before she finished her sentence, Klein pulled out his left hand from the handcuff, and he grabbed the bangle on her wrist in a manner that was as fast as lightning. He then violently swiped it down. At the same time, that hand turned a shade of gold. Klein's green and deep eyes suddenly lit up with two bolts of lightning.
This was creeping hunger. This was psychic piercing.
And the ability to pull his hand out of the cuffs was a magician power. It was the bone-softening power which Klein very seldom used. He had long made plans and preparation for what he would do after infiltrating. It was to find a chance to be alone with Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy and assassinate her without holding back. Only by doing so did he have a chance of defeating a pirate admiral. Only by doing so could he severely injure and capture her. And even if it couldn't be done, he didn't mind killing her. He was already very accustomed to channeling spirits above the gray fog. He wasn't afraid of not being able to obtain the intelligence he needed. A human trafficker didn't deserve any pity. In addition, in order to prevent himself from tripping himself up, he only brought the most difficult-to-detect creeping hunger, which was good at disguising itself. The other mystical items were placed in the mysterious space above the gray fog. Furthermore, he was on the Black Death, with several opposing Beyonders on board. He had to finish the battle as quickly as possible. This was also to avoid being taken down by Tracy's ailment powers. The longer he fought her, the worse the ailments inflicted on him would be. In that instant, the bangle with inlaid diamonds was removed from Tracy's wrist. Klein's green eyes flashed with lightning, while the beautiful and charming Vice Admiral Ailment remained in a daze. All she did was instinctively dodge. She couldn't believe that Helene would attack her, or dare believe that she possessed such reactions and abilities. Chapter 582. Provocation. Tracy saw two bolts of lightning light up in Helene's beautiful, emerald-like eyes as the blinding silver occupied her entire vision. Her beautifully contoured chin was suddenly lifted as though she was about to let out a tragic scream. However, she stiffened on the spot, shattering like a mirage. The full-body mirror placed in the room cracked and quickly crumbled, scattering to the floor. Mirror substitution spell! Tracy's figure, in her pure white shirt, beige trousers, and black leather boots, appeared in the corner where the full-body mirror was located. Before she could catch her breath, she heard heavy footsteps and saw red-haired Helene's dress fluttering to the back as she charged forward like a chariot. The glove she wore on her left hand was pale and gloomy green. Klein had already switched to a zombie state. His muscles were taut, and his strength had increased substantially. His sleeves fluttered as he clenched his fist tightly before throwing it at Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy, like an iron hammer. Bang! 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 Although he continued maintaining Helena's appearance, his actions were like a ferocious beast's. He was fierce and formidable. As he bombarded Tracy with his punches and kicks, all she could do was desperately parry his attacks, without having the time to use other Beyonder powers. If a Demoness of Affliction's corresponding Sequence 9 wasn't Assassin, allowing her to have extraordinary combat skills and dodging capabilities, this barrage of attacks would have left her heavily injured. Bang! 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 Klein's fist emanated a white, frosty air, causing Tracy to tremble with every time she made contact. Gradually, ice began to form on the surface of her body. This was a zombie's mastery of frost powers. Seeing her blood gradually stiffen, Tracy didn't hesitate and took the blow. Her lips turned pale as her mouth opened slightly as she let out a formless scream. Accompanied by this scream, a blue, illusory halo surged out from her body. It left stacked layers of frost in its wake. In just 1 or 2 seconds, both of them found themselves in a frozen world. They were surrounded by thick and transparent ice, and there was loose frost blanketing the exterior. The two looked very close to one another, but they needed to break through the various obstructions to fight each other. A smile appeared on Tracy's gallant and brilliant face as a silent black flame ignited within her body. It quickly melted the surrounding ice as it began to launch a counterattack, allowing Ailment Maiden to grasp the advantage. At this moment in time, she saw Helene, who was often frail and indecisive, snap her fingers without an expression. A matchstick she hadn't noticed lit up as scarlet flames leaped. Instantly, it enveloped the red-haired figure's dress. Tracy's pupils constricted as her spiritual intuition gave her an extreme sense of foreboding. In the silent black flames behind her, Klein leaped out in the form of Helene. He extended both his arms and hugged Tracy, locking her arms in the process. At the same time, he opened his mouth and shouted,
Bang!
A formless air bullet shot out with might that exceeded that of a revolver. It was comparable to the latest rifle models. It passed through the void and accurately hit the back of Tracy's head. Oof! The bullet drilled through her skull, but Vice Admiral Ailment's figure suddenly contracted, turning into a broken black staff. Magic staff substitution spell! Tracy rapidly appeared diagonally across him. The buttons on her shirt dropped as she revealed a mesmerizing view of fair skin. However, what caught Klein's attention wasn't that but the blood on her palm. While Klein restrained Tracy, she had clawed behind her, ripping off a piece of fabric and injuring his thigh. At this moment, Tracy quickly opened and closed her mouth twice as illusory black flames appeared from her palms to burn the blood. This was black magic, a witch's curse! Klein couldn't help but tremble. A black flame ignited from within, from his soles to the top of his head. He was rapidly reduced to paper shreds. Just as he appeared in another corner, he felt countless invisible spiderwebs swirl towards him. Some were hard and attempted to bind him, while others were soft, in a bid to stimulate different parts of his body. Klein, who was a Beyonder who acted extremely calm during combat, felt his heart race as his ears heated up. His body turned numb and sore, having the discomfort of a cold while having the urge to have his blood surge downwards. Compared to Madame Sharon from Contingency, Tracy's spiderweb was far more terrifying. Klein didn't dare to underestimate it as he immediately snapped his fingers. The snap ignited all the surrounding spiderwebs as scarlet flames extended from where they came from and surged towards Tracy like a tidal wave. Back in Tingen, Klein already knew that the spiderwebs from a demoness of pleasure were weak against fire. Instantly, the middle of the room became a huge ignited web. Tracy was caught by surprise as the flames swept towards her. She exhaled as an eerie blue illusory light surged outwards and froze her within a transparent but gigantic crystal. The scarlet flame surged over and kept melting the ice, but it gradually weakened. Klein didn't pick up the diamond inlaid bangle because he wasn't sure what negative side effects it might have. To rashly use a mystical item without sufficient comprehension of it was highly likely to be harmful rather than beneficial. He straightened his body and opened his arms, letting his left glove be dyed in the lustrous glow of the sun, priest of light. At that instant, Tracy, who was hiding inside the ice, felt that extremely familiar Helene wore a holy luster. In between her brows, an unprecedented tenacity surged out. She was pretty and no longer frail. Like a blooming sunflower, she was like a flower of war stained with blood. Tracy shouted with a clearly hoarse voice.
Who are you? Why don't you dare to show yourself?
While wearing a dress, using my own looks would look so odd. It's more suitable to use Helene's appearance.
Klein detached himself as this thought flashed through his mind. Following that, he praised the sun. A magnificent pure beam of light descended with golden flames swirling around it. It completely blanketed the ice and Tracy. As the ice rapidly melted and vanished at a discernible pace, the bright and holy light dimmed before disintegrating. The color in Tracy's face drained as she did a somersault and agilely dodged Klein's psychic piercing from his switch to the interrogator's soul, letting whatever damage she received happen inside the beam of light. The light of holiness was strong against the undead and corrupt, so it was only considered an ordinary Sequence 5 strike on a demoness. Bang! 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 Tracy did multiple somersaults and dodged Klein's air bullets, leaving holes in the carpet. As she rolled, her figure vanished from her enemy's sight. A demoness's invisibility. Klein bent his back slightly as he was on high guard. He then used his spiritual perception and his sense of danger as a clown to seek out Tracy's location. However, he was unable to find her in that short amount of time. Furthermore, his forehead was heating up, and his lungs were burning. His throat hurt and itched. He nearly couldn't keep himself from coughing any longer.
No, I can't let this drag out any longer.
Klein's thoughts raced as he suddenly laughed deeply. He then used a stiff male's voice and said,
Helene told me your secrets. She also told me all of her secrets.
Before he finished his sentence, his spiritual perception was triggered. This was because he discovered an intense emotional fluctuation in a particular corner. The emotions of rage and hatred were impossible to hide from him. Klein immediately turned around and looked over. Instantly, layers of golden scales appeared on his left glove. His eyes were tainted with a pale gold color as his pupils turned vertical. Silently, Tracy's figure was outlined as she wore a painful and twisted expression. Her extremely feminine raven-black curly hair grew uncontrollably as they spread in every direction. Psychiatrist's frenzy! Tracy, whose emotions had been stirred, nearly broke down when faced with such an attack. She temporarily lost her reasoning. Klein took the opportunity and snapped his fingers. An air bullet crossed the distance between them, heading straight for Tracy's face, that remained beautiful despite the twisted expression. Suddenly, a wisp of thick, raven-black hair swept over, changing the trajectory of the air bullet. It struck Tracy in the left shoulder, causing her clothes to tear and blood to spurt. Even her bones were exposed.
Ah!
Tracy let out a shrill cry as immense amounts of black flames spewed out of her body and enveloped her. Following that, thick ice crystals formed outside the black flames. Beyond it, raven-black, curly hair that frantically grew wrapped Tracy, the black flames, and the ice in thick layers. It seemed to form a gigantic cocoon made of human hair. Bang! 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 Klein's air bullets shot out one after another, but they only penetrated the black hair and got stuck in the ice. He paused and made his left glove emit the brilliance of the sun. At that moment, his throat itched. Unable to control himself any further, he began coughing violently. He failed to produce the attacks he was preparing to deliver. Inside the black-haired cocoon, Tracy had recovered her senses. She raised her voice and shouted sharply,
Enemy assault! Enemy assault!
At that instant, Klein paused for a second. In his moment of adrift thoughts, he felt as though he had returned to Backland, returning to the first time he encountered the devil dog. He knew he wasn't its match and could only shout murder and save me before successfully escaping from the danger. At that moment in time, Tracy's cries had the same effect. Even if there weren't a dozen Beyonders on the Black Death, the number was close to that. Furthermore, there were relatively many Beyonders of relatively high sequences. Indeed, killing a pirate admiral in a short period of time is too difficult, even if it's an assassination. Klein coughed twice and snapped his fingers. He stopped attacking and hesitating. He turned and ran for the window in the captain's cabin. The last thing he noticed was the diamond-inlaid bangle, but he didn't dare to retrieve it. Firstly, he was afraid that the severe negative effects would affect his escape, and secondly, he was afraid that Tracy would be able to lead a bunch of Beyonders to pursue him with the help of the item's location after she recovered. A pursuit at sea would then unfold.
I can't be greedy.
Klein turned his head and smashed through the window and fell onto the deck. Two pirates happened to come over as they thrust their cutlasses forward. Oof! Oof! Their cutlasses pierced through a paper figurine. Klein's figure instantly appeared behind one of the pirates as he extended his left hand, opening up a ferocious and creepy mouth on his palm. Creeping hunger bit down on its food while Klein lifted the pirate up before other Beyonders rushed over. He took wide steps and ran to the shipboard. Under gunfire, he plunged into the dark sea under the night sky. Chapter 583, Contingency Plan. The ice-cold water instantly inundated Klein, drenching his golden-red dress and making him sink like a rock. At the same time, creeping hunger had already finished eating the pirate, lightening his load. Klein didn't attempt to float up and had instead continued sinking downwards. He could faintly hear splashing sounds across the distant waves. Apparently, pirates from the sailor pathway had engaged in pursuit. This was their home ground. They could act like fish in such environments for a very long period of time. Klein wasn't alarmed. As a magician who never performed unprepared, he had obviously thought of his escape plans if he met with failure. After all, there was nothing guaranteed about such matters. To do his best acting as Helene and not be discovered by Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy, he had not only left the other mystical items and cache above the gray fog, but he had even done so for the charms that came under the water and wind domain that he recently made. However, this didn't affect him. As a god, a blessed, and a believer trinity, he had many miraculous methods to deal with the corresponding situation. He quickly made creeping hunger turn pale and be dyed in a gloomy green. The surrounding seawater froze, forming layers of frost. Before the frost completely turned into ice, Klein spread his wing muscles and spread out his arms. With the strength of a zombie, he shattered the frost, sending them slightly further away. This way, he temporarily produced a narrow space that didn't have any seawater around him. The water instantly surged backwards to fill the space. Klein extended his left palm and released the terrifying cold and spread it out, creating layers of ice walls. For a brief moment, he seemed to be encased in an ice prison. He could stand in it and produce sound, but he was only limited to that tiny space. Klein immediately took tiny steps in a counterclockwise fashion while murmuring, "The celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings," before rapidly letting his spirit body go above the gray fog. Just as his body appeared at the fool's high-backed chair, he immediately picked up the sea god scepter, which he had placed on the table. Without needing to identify anything, he selected the point of light representing Gehrman Sparrow, who had recently been promoted to a believer of Sea God. Through a previously established connection, he raised the short, milky white scepter and made the blue gems on it emit a blurry luster. He replied to his believer and augmented himself with all sorts of spells, including, but not limited to, underwater breathing, freedom of movement, and pressure resistance. Finally, he used a paper angel to interfere with any divination. He then ordered the nearby undersea creatures to help protect Gehrman Sparrow's escape. After doing all of this, Klein didn't delay and had immediately returned to the real world and gained control of his body. At that moment, the seawater's pressure had crushed the constantly melting ice wall and had retaken that independent space. However, Klein could already breathe easily and swim rapidly. Through the rippling but crystalline water, he saw fishes swimming towards him. A dark shadow rose up from beneath his feet as an unknown behemoth rapidly rose. It was a strange brownish-red creature that looked like a squid. It was so massive that its tentacles were enough to bind an entire ship. It spewed black ink and instantly dyed the surrounding sea black. The few sailor pathway beyonders who were pursuing Klein instantly saw black as their bodies turned numb. Unclear of what was happening, they immediately floated to the surface and dealt with the abnormalities in their bodies. By the time they dived down again to find the enemy, they had already lost track of Klein. At this moment, Klein was swimming at the bottom of the sea with great satisfaction. He even had the time to divert his attention to recall his failed operation and reflect on what he had done.
I had sufficient preparations to act as Helene. Even Tracy, who had shared numerous nights with her on the same bed, couldn't instantly see through me. It accelerated the digestion of the potion. During this process, I still had to overcome my aversion and find a way to both get into character and be detached. This was extremely helpful to the digestion of the potion. I basically did the best I could for the battle. it can be considered a prepared performance, but I underestimated the strength of a Sequence 5 Demoness of Affliction and the experience of someone who inched her way to becoming Vice Admiral Ailment, even though she lost her mystical item in the beginning. Just my present strength and my mystical item weren't enough to kill her quickly, unless I had used the Sea God Scepter. But this is around the Rorstead Archipelago. Through today's battle, I can clearly tell that I lack a mystical item with powerful offensive abilities.
Facing the reality of a failed mission, Klein was no doubt somewhat disappointed. However, he wasn't depressed, because this wasn't the end of this matter. He planned on writing to Mr. Azek to see if he was interested in the ancient chronicles related to death and if he had the time to pay a visit. Before Klein left the captain's cabin, he had snapped his fingers to ignite the male clothing he had left in the changing room, as well as any hair or skin he had left behind. This was to make it seem like he didn't wish to leave any traces, but it was in fact a form of concealment and deceit. What he was concealing was the hair and button he had secretly thrown into a particular room without anyone noticing after he entered the cabin. Having wiped away any traces of himself, Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy would mistakenly believe that the assassin was afraid of exposing himself because of the fear of suffering a remote curse. Then, it would be difficult for her to seriously get the pirates to check for any remnant items. With the hair and button, Klein could use divination to lock onto the location of the Black Death up to a certain amount of time. This way, as long as Mr. Azek was willing, he could bring him to Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy.
Sigh. I originally thought I wouldn't need Mr. Azek's help. I thought I could succeed just by myself, alone. Ultimately, I fell just short.
Klein sighed and felt a blow to his self-esteem. This was one of the reasons why he didn't seek Mr. Azek's help in the beginning. The other reason was that he wasn't certain that Tracy was in possession of the ancient chronicles related to death. If she really didn't have it, it would be rather awkward to have Mr. Azek make a trip for nothing. Furthermore, he was worried that even with Mr. Azek's help, that he would still need to act as Helene to find the Black Death and Tracy. He still needed to wear her clothes and use himself as bait.
That would be too embarrassing to do it in front of someone he knew. In fact, if it wasn't to obtain intelligence and solely to eliminate Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy, it would have been a lot simpler. Once I swim back to Biome and go above the gray fog, I simply need to lock onto their location and use the Sea God Scepter to create a storm. This isn't to say that a huge area of attack blast will definitely kill Tracy on the spot, but it will attract Sea King John Cotman's attention. When the time comes, the Black Death's location will be exposed to the Church of Storms. Sea King will happily take down Ailment Maiden.
Klein shook his head with self-deprecating mockery. With his seer's spiritual intuition guiding him, he rapidly swam towards the shore. On the Black Death, Tracy removed her layers of defense and walked to the diamond-inlaid bangle in her damaged, blood-stained clothes. She bent down to pick it up.
What a cautious attacker. I might not even be comparable to her back when I was an assassin. No, him.
Tracy suddenly clenched her teeth. This wasn't because she nearly died at his hands, but because he had sensed that the man had done something to Helene. According to the way Emperor Roselle put it, she suspected that there was something green growing on her head. Tracy turned her head to look at the nasty wound on her left shoulder as she felt the heart-wrenching pain.
Helene, are you really that cold and heartless? No. Perhaps she was forced.
If not for the strengthening of her physique brought about by the assassin and instigator sequence, with a significant enhancement in subsequent sequences, just that one blow alone could have made her lose her entire arm. She would be like those pirates who had their arms blown off by rifles. As the blood flowed and stained her vision red, Tracy got the blonde female attendant to enter and use her abilities to help her deal with her injuries, while instructing the surrounding pirates who had their eyes fixated on her to search for any items the attacker had left behind. Unfortunately, the pirates informed her that all of his clothes had been automatically destroyed. This made Tracy recall the snap the enemy had made before he left. She sighed once again.
How careful. Furthermore, he's not one bit greedy. If he had taken the bangle, then I wouldn't need to worry about not catching up to him.
Tracy waved her hand, motioning for most of the pirates to leave, leaving behind Worm-Tongue Mythor King and a few high-ranking members of the crew. Tracy ordered in a solemn voice.
Third Mate, go to Bayum again. Perform a thorough investigation to figure out where the Resistance found that Helene.
With great difficulty, Mythor retracted his gaze from his captain's chest.
All right.
Tracy thought for a moment and added,
Spread this matter. Say that I'm seriously injured and will not be able to recover anytime soon. Also, First Mate, immediately set sail. Don't stay here any longer.
As she issued orders, silence was quickly restored around Tracy. Only at this point did she have the time to figure out which faction the attacker came from, why he would attack her, and what motives he had. Unfortunately, the more Tracy thought, the more puzzled she became. She had no idea what the truth was. Although she had many enemies, none of them possessed similar powers. Finally, she found a clue as she muttered to herself,
Creeping hunger?
in the middle of the night, in a private harbor on Blue Mountain Island. Standing by the receding and advancing waves was a female figure. She was none other than Klein, who was still disguised as Helene. He circled under the water and quickly came onto shore. He infiltrated the house of a nearby fisherman and got some tattered clothes to change into before changing back into Gairman Sparrow. Leaving behind the rather expensive dress as compensation, Klein rapidly left the private harbor and returned to the city of Generosity, Bayum, before daybreak. He wasn't in a rush to meet up with Danitz. Instead, he found a random motel to stay in. He used a ritual and brought back Azek's copper whistle, other mystical items, and cash back to the real world. After confirming that he could divine the location of the Black Death, he blew the copper whistle. Chapter 584, Scapegoat. After lowering the copper whistle, Klein had already activated his spirit vision. He saw illusory white bones being weakly thrown up from the ground as they slowly formed a gigantic figure. If the past scenes were like a fountain in a fantasy setting, then this was more like the flow from an ordinary reverse tap. The corners of Klein's mouth moved indiscernibly as he pretended as though he hadn't noticed anything amiss. After a few seconds, the skeleton messenger finally took form. Its nearly 4 meters body tore through the ceiling once again as the pitch-black flames in its eye sockets burned silently. Klein folded the letter he had finished writing and threw it up. He described in detail the tycoon Jimmy Necker in the letter. He mentioned the connections between the Death Chronicles found in the southern continent's Balaam Empire's mausoleum, as well as the connection the item had with Vice Admiral Hurricane Kolingos and Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy. He also mentioned how he had successfully sneaked in, and although his assassination had failed, he had left behind something that could be used to determine the location of the Black Death. Of course he didn't go into detail how he sneaked in. He had only roughly recounted Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's combat techniques and style. After the messenger caught the letter with a swipe that could send an adult human flying, Klein coughed and cleared his throat.
I already have a messenger.
The pitch-black flames in the skeleton messenger's sockets clearly flickered before its body collapsed like a waterfall, before drilling into the parquet.
You don't have to be afraid of becoming my messenger anymore, right? Am I that detestable to your kind? Yes. These messengers from the underworld probably can't bear to leave Mr. Azek. After all, that's a direct descendant of death. There might not even be any skip in the generational line. You want to cozy up with someone powerful? I get it.
Klein was just about to pack up and check out when his nose hitched suddenly and sneezed. Achoo! Achoo! Cough! 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 Mucus flowed out as he coughed. His forehead, slowly but decisively, began burning with heat.
Oh no, Vice Admiral Ailment's ailment is still lingering in my body. And I confronted a 10 degrees Celsius cold wind in order to return to Bayum. I really fell ill as a result.
Klein used inferior tissue paper to wipe his mucus, contemplating whether to summon himself and act using a spirit-body state so that his physical body could heal by itself. After serious consideration, he believed that it was impossible. Firstly, his physical condition would clearly affect his spirit body's condition. The two were closely related in some magical manner. Secondly, if he ignored it, his physical condition would definitely worsen.
I'm becoming a little dazed from the fever.
Klein touched his forehead and prepared to return to the Wind of Azure Inn to meet up with Danitz. Then he had to consider if he should head to a hospital or clinic to buy some medicine. In the Berg household in the City of Silver, Derek finally obtained the Radiant Spirit Pack Tree fruit from Ma'am Hermit, and he successfully concocted the Solar High Priest potion. It was golden in color and had a scorching hot temperature. When Derek drank it, he felt the burning sensation in his throat. His eyes lit up suddenly as they grew brighter, like there were two miniature suns hidden in them. His body radiated concentric ripples of pure light as his exposed skin protruded to form black patterns that were visible to the naked eye. At the same time, his body hair grew longer, as though they were changing into feathers that were swirling with golden flames. Derek knew that there would be similar changes when consuming a potion at Sequence 7. He didn't panic or become flustered. He clenched his teeth and repeatedly recalled that pain of him personally killing his parents, and the hope that arose from the depths of his heart after meeting Mr. Fool. Despite being on the brink of losing control, he managed to persevere through it. After a while, everything abnormal about him was restored back to normal. However, the air he exhaled was mixed with the warmth of the sun. He felt that his body had become stronger again, and he had some considerable resistance against ailments in treacherous environments. However, that wasn't the main point. Derek liked the various theurgical knowledge that appeared in his mind. They included Fire of Light, Horror Immunity, Holy Oath, Cleave of Purification, Sun Halo, Holy Light Summoning, Holy Water Creation, etc. Derek paced around in delight as he felt that the related theurgical spells he had were very suitable for him in dealing with the evil monsters that hid in the dark. He didn't hide the news and immediately ran to the Twin Towers and recorded the information of his advancement. This way, after a preliminary inspection, he would have the qualifications to helm a small patrolling team as its captain. He could come into contact with more of the City of Silver's information. This includes the method to removing the mental corruption of a Beyonder characteristic, which Mr. World wants. While Derek was answering the registration clerk's various questions, he couldn't help but recall the promise that he hadn't been able to fulfill all this time. Owing something to others often left him uneasy and uncomfortable, and now he could finally see the light that could restore his calm. In the Amiris Leaf Bar, Wormtongue Mythor-King was holding a cup of red wine. He sat across from the elderly strongman Ozil, crossed his right leg, and leisurely asked,
"Did you figure out anything specific?"
He had been instructed by his captain, Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy, to return to Byam and investigate the fake Helene. For this, he found Ozil, who had originally issued the mission. He couldn't directly seek out the resistance because there was a small chance that they were cooperating with the fake Helene. To question them in person was no different from directly bringing his head to the Governor General's office in exchange for the bounty reward. Ozil pulled a chair and sat down.
They didn't hide anything, but I can't be sure if they're speaking the truth or not. As you know, I prefer using fists rather than brains. They said that Helene was brought over by Blazing Danitz. He represented Vice Admiral Iceberg and hoped to establish a cooperative relationship with the Resistance. They wanted to provide a certain amount of help, and Helene was a way to express their goodwill.
Mythor ruminated over the two names as his expression slowly turned solemn.
Blazing Danitz? Vice Admiral Iceberg.
He leaned back into his chair as he knitted his brows bit by bit. As one of Vice Admiral Hurricane's former captains, he was now the third mate of Vice Admiral Ailment's flagship. He was no stranger to the other pirate admirals, and he knew that Vice Admiral Iceberg was powerful and had a rich collection. With just one ship and a few subordinates, she was able to resist the other pirate admirals. In terms of strength, she was a little stronger than two of his bosses. More pertinently, Vice Admiral Iceberg seldom involved herself in the conflict between pirates. She sought information and explored the unknown to seek out treasure. She was more like an adventurer than a pirate.
Why would she suddenly want to assassinate Captain? This doesn't suit her character. She previously suffered a setback because of Admiral of Blood's rumors. She should be focusing on seeking revenge on him.
Mythor took a sip of red wine as he rubbed his forehead with his other hand. He temporarily stopped thinking about Vice Admiral Iceberg, and he placed his attention on Blazing Danitz. As he carefully recalled, his pupils suddenly shrank. He discovered that there were some recent problems regarding this fourth bosun of the Golden Dream he was familiar with. He laid a trap and killed Steel Mavetti, Blood Brambles Hendry, and Calm Squall. His bounty was raised to 4,200 pounds, and in a short period of time he got embroiled in some matter, causing his bounty to rise again, reaching 5,500 pounds.
This has already exceeded my bounty.
Mythor thought to himself silently as Blazing Danitz's figure surfaced before him. He found him mysterious and terrifying.
He advanced? Or did he receive some great benefits because of something?
Mythor leaned forward and put down the cup. He whispered seriously,
I originally treated his bounty increase as a joke, but reality has informed me that Blazing Danitz is a great pirate worthy of a 5,500-pound bounty.
Mythor looked up and said to Strongman Ozil,
Help me seek out intel on Blazing, the recent ones.
In the luxurious suite in the Wind of Azure Inn, when Danitz opened the door and saw Gehrman Sparrow, he glanced around warily before making way. He asked in excitement and curiosity after closing the door,
How was it? Did the hunt succeed? Vice Admiral Ailment is a famous beauty. Back when I saw her, she was even more charming than I imagined. What a pity if she were to just die like that. She should be locked up forever without parole. Pui! How can she be prettier than Captain? Those with looks like her are plenty in the Red Theater.
Contradictory thoughts ran through Danitz's head. Klein clenched his fist and placed it to his mouth before coughing violently. After calming down, he answered coldly.
Almost.
Danitz sighed.
What a pity.
But deep down, he was thinking,
This madman, Gehrman Sparrow, is really strong. He infiltrated the Black Death to assassinate Vice Admiral Ailment, but was only just fell short of success. Even though he failed, he successfully returned almost without any injuries. One had to know that the reason why every pirate admiral was famous throughout the 5 seas, being second only to the 4 kings, wasn't only because they themselves were strong, it was also because they represented a crew, a force to be reckoned with. They had many beyonders under them. To be able to escape from the Black Death after a failed assassination had indicated that Gehrman Sparrow was in no way weaker than any pirate admiral. Is creeping hunger really that powerful? No, even if I were in his shoes and had creeping hunger, I wouldn't be able to go that far.
Danitz was increasingly convinced that his choice of not resisting during his first encounter with Gehrman Sparrow was extremely wise. Klein coughed twice again and prepared to instruct Danitz to buy some medicine for him from the hospital. He then recalled that the cause of his illness was complicated. The medicine provided to him without a doctor's careful examination might not be effective. Even the many medicines that Emperor Roselle had previously invented were the same.
If it wasn't because it's impossible to use the gray fog to establish a remote treating system, I really wish that I could consult Emlyn White to make me some medicine.
Klein went to the washroom to wash up and change into his original clothes and burn the clothes he obtained from the fisherman. Upon seeing him come out, Danitz went over with a paper bag and said in a sycophantic manner,
This is the 700 pounds they gave.
At this point, he and Klein heard someone knock on the door. It was Captain Elland. When the captain rushed into the room, he gave Gehrman Sparrow a deep look and suppressed his voice.
I planned on returning to Pritz Harbor, but I received a piece of intel. Something huge seemed to have happened at Banzi Harbor.
Chapter 585, Buying Medicine.
The Church of Storms has finally taken action on Banzi Harbor. Don't tell me that this matter was targeted at me. It really is possible. I need to be careful.
Klein was alarmed. He thought,
Involve the upper echelons of the Church of Storms? No, it should be the most elite forces. I suspect that the pontiff of the Church of Storms, that grounded angel, had personally taken action. He might have even used a Grade 0 sealed artifact. After all, he might be facing a king of angels, one that's even older than the fourth epoch, as well as his descendants.
Klein clenched his fist and placed it to his mouth before coughing. He asked calmly without any qualms.
What happened?
Elend didn't notice any abnormal reaction from Gehrman Sparrow. He retracted his gaze and surveyed the area.
I don't know what exactly happened. I only know that it might have involved the upper echelons of the Church of Storms. And for a period of time before that, all routes that lead to Banzi Harbor were cancelled. This might have been a so-called omen.
Klein nodded and calmly asked.
What's the outcome?
He wasn't the least bit surprised that the Church of Storms had only taken action on Banzi Harbor in the past few days. Even though the mandated punishers were known for being rash and irascible, there was still a protocol that needed to be followed for serious matters like this. For example, they needed to make a confirmation, evacuate a portion of innocent residents, or seal off the surrounding sea. All of this needed time. Elend was unable to read Gehrman Sparrow's true emotions as he sighed with a smile.
There won't be a Banzi Harbor for a very long period of time.
As expected of the Church of Storms.
Klein secretly clicked his tongue, feeling even more curious about the detailed process. He wanted to know whether Red Angel Medici had appeared, and if he really was sleeping near Banzi Harbor. He wanted to know if he had been wiped out by the Church of Storms, and wished to know what happened to the natives in Banzi Harbor. He wanted to know what it meant for them to speak in such a staccato manner, and he wished to know what secrets were hidden in the Green Lemon restaurant and the telegraph office. Unfortunately, with Banzi Harbor's destruction, it was difficult for him to obtain any actual answers. Perhaps the internal record of the Church of Storms would mention them, but Klein had no way of getting them. With the Hanged Man's rank, there was no way he could gain access to such confidential information.
I'll have to nurture Mr. Hanged Man into a high-sequence demigod before I can know the answers to my questions.
Klein sighed silently and said, without a change in expression,
That place is indeed very dangerous.
Before he finished his sentence, his throat itched as he coughed violently.
You fell ill?
Elend asked, puzzled. He originally imagined that Gehrman Sparrow was like him, a Beyonder whose physique had been considerably enhanced. It was unlikely for Beyonders like them to fall ill before they grew weak from age. But from the looks of it, his previous guess might have been wrong. Klein answered tersely, without giving an explanation.
A question of no value or meaning. It would be odd if he isn't ill after an intense battle with ailment maiden.
Danitz grumbled in contempt from the side. Elend chuckled and said,
I can recommend you an apothecary that's better than a hospital or clinic. That's his Beyonder job. He has a tiny herb store in the alley, diagonally across Red Theater. Heh, he's known for selling male enhancements, but that's not what he's best at.
Does every apothecary develop such medicine? That's right. It's absolutely one of the most profitable medicine-based businesses. It's only odd not to do it if they're capable of doing it.
Klein nodded slightly in response.
Why haven't I heard of him?
Danitz asked, surprised.
He only came to Bayam in the past few months. When was your last visit here in the City of Generosity?
Elend asked with a chuckle.
When I took your crappy boat.
Danitz answered silently in his mind. He carefully recalled and discovered that in the past few months, apart from this period of time, he had passed by Bayam once during the early days of his vacation. At other times, he was drifting out at sea in search of treasure. Otherwise, he was at other places or harbors enjoying himself, so it was true that he wasn't aware of any minor changes in the City of Generosity.
I've already spent quite a few days in Bayam. I've been to the Red Theater several times, but I've not heard anything about this apothecary. This can only serve to imply that his male enhancement medicines are limited in effect.
Danitz bragged as he said stubbornly. Elend smiled and didn't debate with the great pirate. Instead, he said to Gehrman Sparrow,
If it's only an ordinary ailment, the apothecary will only charge a slight premium, and for you, it doesn't matter if it's expensive. What's most important is to recover your health as quickly as possible. No adventurer wishes to stay in a sick state. This implies danger, and that you might become the target of someone else. It implies the increased risk of losing control.
Indeed, maintaining a good state is a rather important matter for Beyonders. However, the price is still very important, all right? If that apothecary were to charge £1,000, then I might as well buy medicine from the hospital. Or, I can describe the situation of my illness and get that vampire, Emlyn White, to make me some medicine. Although I already have £6,000 in savings and have several Beyonder characteristics, I still need to consider it. I still want to add a mystical item with lethal offensive power and seek out clues to the high-sequence potion formula.
Klein mumbled inwardly. High-sequence potion formulas were impossible to put a price on in this mysterious world. Therefore, Klein only thought of buying the relevant clues. After Ellen left, Klein took the £700 and gave Danitz £200. Wearing his hat and holding his cane, he coughed and wiped his snot before stepping out the door in preparation to take a carriage to the vicinity of the Red Theater. Danitz was very curious about the apothecary's medicine. He pasted 2 mustaches on his face, wore a cap, and followed. With Klein's guidance, he already knew that using a scarf to hide his face was an act that strongly attracted attention in Bayam. He took his advice to buy some fake mustaches. In the alley diagonally across the Red Theater, the moment Klein entered, he saw a man furtively come out of a nameless herb store. The moment the man saw someone, he hurriedly lowered his head and rushed off.
Don't worry, we won't be guessing what medicine you're buying.
Klein coughed 2 times again, increased his pace, and walked into the dark herb store. He scanned the area and was surprised because the boss was someone he knew. The boss was wearing a black robe that resembled a village witch doctor. He was in his 30s, with black hair and brown eyes. His face was round and his body chubby. He was none other than the chubby apothecary, who often liked to use sarcasm at the gathering held by old Mr. Eye of Wisdom in Backland. Klein had once recognized him at a circus.
He stopped showing up at old Mr. Eye of Wisdom's Beyonder gathering because he left Backland.
Klein coughed and took 2 steps forward.
Make some medicine for me.
On the chubby apothecary's shoulder stood a round-eyed owl. The man and the bird looked up at the same time at Klein. After a brief examination, the chubby apothecary revealed a warm smile.
Friend, it's cold outside. Don't do those deeds out in the open, although it's true that it can be rather exciting.
What the hell?
Klein was first stumped before he understood what he was getting at.
When batting Tracy, I was influenced by her pleasure powers. Blood flowed down to my nether regions, and my desires undulated. This resulted in my body emptying out, making it faster and easier for the ailment to strike me. When escaping, the ice-cold sea was fine since I had theurgical spells protecting me. But the wind on the way back was rather cold. It worsened my sickness. In conclusion, doesn't this look like getting sick as a result of having pleasure out in the open? As expected of an apothecary, he has sharp eyes.
Klein maintained a composed expression and just looked at him without answering him. All he did was wait for him to concoct the medicine. Danitz turned his head to look out the herb store as he held back his laughter with great difficulty.
What dog's apothecary is this? He can't even distinguish the ailments released by Ailment Maiden.
He thought in glee. When the chubby apothecary didn't get a response, he dully opened some cabinets, took out some common or strange herbs and insect carapaces, stuffed them into a paper bag, and handed it over.
Put it all in water and cook it for half an hour. Drink the liquid that's left over. For solely.
It's a little expensive.
Klein glanced at Danitz. The latter immediately took out the money automatically. As the chubby apothecary collected the money, he bent his back and suppressed his voice to say with a chuckle,
I have medicine that can make you stand out in that area, the kind that has mummy powder added. Need it? I guarantee you that you'll be satisfied. I know you might be very strong, but men always seek to be stronger.
Firstly, I need to have a girlfriend.
Klein coldly shook his head and rejected the chubby apothecary's recommendation. The chubby apothecary straightened his back in disappointment. He turned his gaze and sized up the two before asking,
Are the both of you adventurers?
Yes.
Klein answered simply. The chubby apothecary rubbed his hands and said,
I have a request, but you'll only be paid after completing it.
How big is the reward?
Klein pinched his nose.
100 pounds.
The chubby apothecary shouted as his heart pained for the money.
Help me find someone. His name is Roy King. He's my teacher. He got me to meet him here, but I haven't seen him after waiting for months, and I have no way of contacting him.
Is there a portrait or a photograph?
Klein inquired, coughing. The chubby apothecary took out a photograph from a secret pouch by his waist and handed it over. It was of a relatively young man. His hair was neatly combed back, and he wore glasses. He appeared very gentlemanly.
Your teacher? I might believe it, if you're the teacher.
The chubby apothecary coughed dryly and said,
He's at least 60, but he looks young.
A beyonder power or a mystical item?
Klein nodded in thought and began asking about the specifics. After confirming that there weren't any items he could use to divine, he took the paper bag and left the store. After he disappeared from the alley, the owl standing on the chubby apothecary's shoulder suddenly said,
Dark Will, that guy might know you.